We want to be sensitive to this.
Okay, we are live.
All right, it's 6 o'clock right on the dot. I'll call the meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next on the agenda is approval or revision of the agenda. And I know we need to move personnel 3.07 to make that 8.01. Are there any additional revisions to the agenda? Oops. No. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the revised agenda? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Mark. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, great. Next on the agenda, item 1.04, public comment. Sarah, do we have anyone for public comment this evening?
We do not.
Okay. President's report. I attended my first OC and BOCES meeting last week on Thursday at the OC and BOCES office in Liverpool. They gave an overview of their facilities projects that they have done in the past year. A lot of minor projects that they've done at their various facilities. They talked about issues that affect all of the component districts. One was student teachers and how the component districts are working so that they can include student teachers in their buildings with COVID safety in mind, of course. They talked about or actually the OC and BOCES superintendent gave an update on state testing, which is there isn't an update yet. So the 3 to 8 state testing announcement should come sometime early spring, hopefully. One of the major concerns related to testing is equity, because you have kids learning in different formats and kids with different levels of access to learning. So that's one of the issues that is being, a major issue that's being discussed in regards to testing. Also, there is legislation Senator Meyer is sponsoring related to digital equity. There's a bill that he has, but unfortunately, the bill has some unintentional costs that are going to be pushed back on districts. So the bill is aimed at improving digital equity across districts, but unfortunately it comes with a price tag for school districts. So there was discussion about school districts taking a look at that legislation and perhaps doing some activity related to making sure that the bill itself perhaps is passed, but not the part where the costs are passed on to school districts. So that may be something legislative liaisons want to look into. And we talked about, they had a discussion about school resource officers that I found interesting, and particularly the shortage and how a number of the component districts are looking to do exactly what FM did, which is to have the SPOs in place. Some of them have partnerships with the sheriff's department, but they're all having, the ones who would like to have school resource officers are having difficulty finding them at this point. So they are looking at doing exactly what FM did earlier this year. So that concludes my report as board president. Were there any questions?
Marissa, do you happen to have a copy of that bill, or that was just something?
They just mentioned it, but I will get a copy and I will forward that to the whole board and see if that's something that they'd like, the board would like the legislative liaisons to look into.
Yep.
So I'll get that off to you.
All right. And we can follow up on that at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no additional questions from me, I will turn over to Dr. Tice for the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, President Mims. As far as my superintendent's report under internal operations, we are on schedule to recognize our Hall of Distinction award recipients at the January 11th Board of Education meeting. I would like to thank our district clerk, Sarah Gridley, for her organizational efforts. I had a chance to see a sneak preview of the plaques, and they certainly look outstanding. Under community relations, as the Board of Education is aware, we are in receipt of a few letters from parents asking us to consider providing additional days of instruction or to relax our expectations regarding social distancing and mask wearing. I mean, even though we all eagerly anticipate a return to some semblance of normalcy, I suspect that the days and weeks ahead will determine whether we remain in a yellow zone or transition to an orange or red zone because of a resurgence of the virus. So we really certainly appreciate the input, but I hope our public knows that we're doing our best to keep the schools open as we go forward. Under administration, I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to our administrators for coordinating the yellow zone testing in each of their buildings. As you may be aware, none of the 919 tests that were administered returned a positive result. While results like these are encouraging, I know the administration has been wrestling with recent quarantines of staff and students and providing coverage in each of their school buildings, and I certainly appreciate their efforts. Under non-instructional and business operations, we are in the middle of our budget meetings with the administrators in preparation for the deliberations that we will face in the months ahead as we begin to develop a spending plan for next year. As you are aware, the governor will release his executive budget in January, which will give us a better understanding of our New York school aid for the upcoming year. In the area of personnel, later in today's agenda, I will ask you to take action on the impending retirements of two of my key district office administrative team members. While there is much work to be done in both of their FM careers, I would like to be among the first to acknowledge with gratitude and to congratulate Lisa Deneen and Jeff Gordon for their efforts on behalf of the children. Even though their individual retirements will not become effective until June 30th, 2020 and January 31st, 2023, respectively, I know that there is much more work to be done in the time remaining. And in the area of students, I would like to take time to remind our students and their families about any travel out of state during the holidays. Please know that since we are all in this together during the pandemic, your cooperation with the governor's executive orders regarding testing and quarantining will be mission critical as to whether we will be able to remain open for in-person learning, especially after the holidays. As you may have noticed, a number of other school districts in central New York have shifted to a remote learning platform because of the number of students and staff members who have been placed in quarantine. Simply put, I would like to thank our families in advance for their cooperation with the protocols that have been put in place to ensure everyone's safety during this unprecedented time. In the area of instruction, given the nature of our virtual meetings, I would like to thank the Board of Education for previewing this evening's curriculum presentation and forwarding your questions in advance to Dr. Coughlin. If you have any additional questions or in need of further clarification, I encourage you to email your inquiries to Dr. Coughlin. And then finally, under strategic planning and construction, the Wellwood Middle School Capital Improvement Project remains ahead of schedule. We recently relocated the Library Media Center at Wellwood to a temporary location similar to what was done at the high school last year, so that contractors will be able to get started on the renovations to that space. The new addition is coming along quite nicely, and it's our hope to have it enclosed in anticipation of the impending winter weather. That concludes my report. I would like to add, I spoke with Mr. Seidberg earlier today regarding our facilities committee, and we are confirmed for this Thursday. So in accordance with what we had discussed, and you can elaborate during that on your committee reports. So we will have Dr. Kilmer there from the high school. That concludes my report. Thank you, President Mims.
Thank you, Dr. Tice. Are there any questions from the board for Dr. Tice? Okay.
I just have one. You had discussed, I think it was 2 meetings ago, about some cabinet meetings taking place to potentially review the K-4 days in school and whether there would be any adjustments to the hybrid model on that. Have those meetings taken place, or are they still taking place, or can you give us any information on that?
It's my understanding that just a couple of meetings have taken place in and around the Thanksgiving holiday. They're still under deliberations at this point.
Additional questions? Okay, next on the agenda, we have our committee and representative updates. Let's see, nothing from audit. Community relations is scheduled to meet on January 12th. Facilities, Dan?
Yeah, we haven't met since our last meeting. Like Dr. Tice said, we have a meeting on Thursday to continue the vetting process for the next capital improvement project, and that's Thursday's meeting will be focused on high school needs and programmatic needs. That's all we have on that for now.
Okay. Finance met on December 8th. Next meeting is January 25th. Were there any updates from finance just in case?
No, other than to point out that later in our agenda, we will be having a discussion of the solar farm pilot agreement.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Okay. Policy is meeting tomorrow. Anything you want to say in advance of that meeting, Elena? Okay.
Nothing right now, Marissa. Thank you.
All right. Education Foundation, Sherry, didn't they just meet?
Yep, I had a meeting last Wednesday, if I remember correctly, and really they just to the public, to the teachers, want to emphasize that they do have grants available with they've loosened up their application and their requirements, like deadline requirements. Just anybody who needs help, they're out there to help. And they just discussed a bit about fundraising this year, which is of course scaled back quite a bit. They did their Paula K just this past weekend, and we have a donation from SECNY. They're doing a partnership, and just the dining week will come up in a modified format this year as well. But they're out there to help the teachers if needed.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you or Rebecca have anything for legislative liaison reports at this time? I think we're good there.
I mean, I don't think this is new to anyone, but there was a legislative preview webinar last week, which I had planned to attend, but I couldn't make it. And all these recordings, including all the DEI equity recordings or webinars, I should say, are taped. So that is something that I do plan to watch when I can catch up and have some time, and we'll report out at the next meeting if I have something substantive to share, or Sherry as well. We'll talk about it.
I was going to say, you and I could touch base about, we can divide and conquer.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, our student board representative, Lucy.
Yeah, so I had a few comments this week on Wednesday workloads again. Obviously, like 30 minutes per class doesn't seem like a lot, but I feel like in the end, 30 minutes adds up, plus procrastinating probably to about a school days of work. And then I also, a few people have commented to me about the screen time on the off days, or even on Wednesdays to begin with overall. I found an article in Times that was talking about how people that have above the recommended screen time, they're twice as likely to be diagnosed with like depression and anxiety. So I feel like it's kind of unavoidable that we have high screen times, but maybe like somebody mentioned to me like a mental wellness break or a little bit more like outdoor time during the school day to make it a little bit easier on ourselves. And right now that's all I have. And then actually I have one more thing that was kind of funny when people mentioned to me, I was talking in study hall, people were telling me the parking lot issues in the afternoon, how the buses are always there and it's hard to get to Manlius because you have to go all the way around to Fayetteville, but that's basically it.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And I know Dr. Tice is working to get to make sure there are answers to your questions that you pose in your reports. Okay. Next on the agenda then, item 3.01, resolution, real property law, section 487,
President
rescind.
Mims,
Oops, sorry.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second. We
Okay.
do have legal counsel coming to assist us with this action and discussion for the next 3 agenda items. However, she hasn't joined the meeting yet.
Okay.
If we can skip to 3.04, district logo use, Lindsay Plantholt from Ferrara Fiorenza is in the waiting room. If we could skip ahead to that one and then circle back around to the 487 and the pilot.
Okay. No worries. Thank you.
One moment.
So is there a motion then to amend the agenda at this time to move item 3.04 to item 3.01, and then item 3.01 will be 3.04 and so forth? I don't want to go through the whole thing, so I'll mess it up. Oops, do I have a motion? Oh, thank you, Rebecca, and a second from Daryl. Any discussion? All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, so we're on 3.04, district logo use, and we have Lindsay here to explain this issue to the board. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you for coming to the meeting.
Welcome. I'm just going to try to get the presentation started and then I can share my screen. Okay, is everybody able to see that PowerPoint? No.
No.
Not yet.
Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was asked to come and talk tonight about trademark protection for the district's intellectual property, including their logos. So just a little bit of background about what exactly is a trademark. So we're going to be dealing with New York state law in this case. So under New York state law, a trademark is any word, name, symbol, or device, or any combination of those that's used by a person to identify and distinguish their own goods from goods that are manufactured or sold by another person. So in this case, you can see a couple examples up on the slide. It could be simply the name Fayetteville-Manlius School District. It could be the actual design of that logo. And then it can also include things like the mascot, the oak tree, different things that are used to distinguish the district from other entities. There's also a service mark that can be registered by the district, and there's a category for education. So this is similar to a trademark. It's a word or symbol that is meant to identify and distinguish the services of a single entity. So, for the school district, those would be the educational services provided by the schools. So the protections that are offered for trademarks in New York State, there's 2 types of legal protection. There's what's called common law protection, and that applies whether a trademark has been officially registered with New York State or whether it's unregistered, but it's a mark that is used by the district. And then there's also specific protections that are under the general business law in New York State.
And those apply specifically to registered trademarks where an application has been filed officially with New York State. Some of the advantages of actually going through the trademark registration process is that there are specific remedies if you believe that your trademark has been infringed. That can include injunction, meaning you're stopping the infringing party from continuing with what they're doing. It can also include destruction of any product. So if somebody created t-shirts that had your logo and you didn't authorize them, a judge could order that they be destroyed. There's also damages available for any damages to this district's reputation. They can also require that if the infringing party had any profits from the sale of a product, that they be given to the district. And then specifically in certain cases, if they were intentionally infringing upon the mark and you can prove that, then you may be able to be awarded attorney's fees and up to 3 times the damages and profits. So there's some advantages to actually going through the registration process because you have these additional remedies. I think from a practical standpoint, it also gives you a little bit more authority in sending a cease and desist letter. So if you don't want to go straight to litigation, but you believe someone's infringing upon your mark, you send them a cease and desist letter. And in that letter, you can say, the Fayetteville-Manlius Hornet that you used on your product is actually a trademark registered by the district. And I think that just lends more of an air of authority, gives you a little more teeth in protecting your trademarks. And then I think also there's better protection in the long run. So there's less of a chance that the mark is going to be considered to have been abandoned by the school district if you actually have a registration with New York State. So the process to actually go about registering a trademark, this is governed by the New York State General Business Law, and it's administered by the Department of State. So the process is that you fill out a registration form and you include information about your mark. So this includes a written description of the mark. It also includes the date when the mark was first used to establish that you were the person that developed this mark and first used it and that you are the true owner. Then a description of the goods that you intend to produce using that mark, the manner in which you place the mark on the goods. So say printed or stamped or embroidered, depending on the type of product you're manufacturing. And then the class numbers that you wish to protect. And you need to have 3 examples for each class number. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But the registration form itself is not particularly onerous. You just need to be able to show that the mark is actually in use for any product that you're trying to protect. So the text is a little small here, but essentially there are a bunch of different classifications of goods. These are listed in the New York State regulations, and it includes anything you could possibly think that you could put your logo on. So some of the categories are up there. You'll see things like paper and paper articles. And so some examples might include like a bumper sticker, stationery, things like that. It can include all kinds of apparel, sports equipment, coffee mugs, really anything you can think of that you would want to put the district's logo on, you can protect. So the trick when you register is that you do have to register in each category that you intend to produce the product. So if you do want to protect the district's ability to sell t-shirts for fundraising, then you would need to do the apparel category. If you also thought you would want to sell coffee mugs, that's a different category, and you still have to register under that category as well. So there's a $50 fee for each category you register, but the registration is actually good for 10 years. So that, that's a long time that you have, exclusive use of that mark, and it can be renewed for successive terms. And the renewal fee is the same as the original registration fee. It's $50 for each category. So if you were doing apparel and sporting goods, that's $100. And when you do register, you have to provide examples of the category. So you would have to show, here's a t-shirt that I printed with the hornet on it, and here's a sweatshirt, and here's a baseball cap. And you put that together with your application and send it to the Department of State. So once you do have certain trademarks registered, well, actually, let's say before you go through that trademark registration process, I think it's important to have a district policy in place that addresses the district's brand identity. And you could also have a regulation that goes into a little more detail, but the policy and the regulation can address ownership over the marks. So the district can indicate, these are the specific marks that we've actually registered, but you can kind of include this all-encompassing language that includes any mark that the district is using. And then the regulation can address the types of use that would be approved or not approved. So for example, you might say, we're going to turn down any application if someone wants to use our mark for something related to promoting drugs or alcohol or a political cause or anything that's just not really in the school district's, general message. Those would be instances where you would not approve use of the mark, but then you can talk about instances when you would allow use of the mark. So for example, for student groups, boosters, the HSA, cases when they're not turning a profit necessarily, they're maybe just doing fundraising. And in those cases, you generally wouldn't require them to do a specific licensing agreement or charge any royalties, but you could require them to submit a request to use the mark, and they would not be permitted to, go around using the hornet on different apparel without having gotten permission from the district. And that just helps you control the use of the mark and make sure that it's not out there being used in a way that's not appropriate. This policy or regulation, if you choose, could also address for-profit purposes of using the mark. So this would be an example where it would be someone maybe outside of the school, a local business that wanted to produce goods to be sold to students and parents. And that's a case where you would use a licensing agreement, and you would likely want to require at least sort of a nominal payment of royalties if they're using the district's mark to make a profit on selling products. You could also develop just a request form to make the process easy. That's something we've done for other school districts. And I think it really helps have a set process down so that everybody knows, here's what you need to do if you'd like to use the district's logo. Here's the process, and here's sort of the rubric for what we will and will not allow. So to talk a little about licensing agreements, these are important because it protects the district from losing their claim to trademarks. If you just allow anyone who wants to use your mark, there's the risk that it's sort of considered to be an indiscriminate licensing, and you would lose your legal right and ownership to that mark. Part of the licensing agreement includes quality control. So if you're allowing a local business to produce goods, you can put provisions in the licensing agreement to make sure that these aren't going to reflect badly on the district, that they are an accurate representation of the logo, and any kind of other things that protect sort of that trademark and district's own reputation. And then of course the licensing agreement can include a royalty fee for someone using the mark commercially. And then I mentioned before, cease and desist letters. This is another way to sort of police the use of the mark, make sure that it's being used appropriately. And if the district does feel its mark has been infringed, it's important to go after those people and say, look, we're not allowing you to use this mark in this inappropriate way, or you did not ask our permission to use this mark for a commercial use. Because if you allow people to continually infringe on a mark, that can again weaken the strength of the mark and result in you losing your legal ownership of that mark. So I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you very much for that report and information, Lindsay. Are there questions from the board? Oops.
I have one. Lindsay, it's Mark. Thank you for that presentation. Do you offer guidance as to how a school district would go about developing a policy on the logo, like a framework? So we're not too broad, we're not too detailed.
Yes, so I have some examples of policy language that you could use that sort of provide an outline for, you know, what appropriate use would be. So like I was kind of saying before, you may put in that regulation types of products that normally would not be approved. So, you know, products that are otherwise adverse to the mission of the district. And that regulation could also address, you know, what the approval process is, whether it's, you know, you have to fill out this form or you have to make just generally a written submission. But yeah, I think it's important to think about, you know, you don't want to go too broad, you don't want to go too narrow. And I think you also kind of want to leave the discretion up to the board so that you're not really stuck. So if you say, you know, oh, sure, we'll allow this, and somebody somehow finds a way to get around it, having the discretion to say, you know, we're reserving the right to approve or disapprove anything based on our analysis of it. So, but to answer your question, we can absolutely help you develop that policy.
Thank you.
So my question, from what I'm understanding, FM currently does not have our trademark registered at all. If that's something, if we choose not to go down that path, but then instead, or, you know, along with that, do a policy and a administrative regulation, would those still be enforceable?
Yes, so New York State does still offer legal protections, whether a trademark is registered or not, and you can develop a policy regulating the use of your mark, whether or not it's registered. It is just, I think, an extra hurdle if you were to want to prosecute someone for infringement. The legal standard's a little bit different if it's not an officially registered trademark. So it's a little more of an uphill battle. That's one of the advantages of registering it. But you could certainly still regulate its use, whether or not it's been officially registered with New York State.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you. Do you find that there are school districts who have registered trademarks who have actually gone after, like, has it been worth the, you know, I imagine, you know, the financial cost of going after someone who might have infringed?
Yeah, so we've had a couple instances. What typically happens is there are companies out there who they're a national company and they go into school districts and they essentially take their logo or their name and they're creating apparel and it's sold in local stores. So it might be in a Target, it might be in like a local CVS. You've probably seen this actually, I think, at the Target in Fayetteville. But what happens is those companies will say, look, you know, as goodwill, we're going to give the district 1% of the profits that we make on sale of those apparel items. And really, they're just making money on your name. So I have written cease and desist letters saying, you know, this is a trademark that we have legally protected in New York State and it's registered and, you know, you're not allowed to do this. It is something that we've done. I think one potential caveat of that is sometimes it can be a little bit like whack-a-mole where you may have registered the Hornet, but you may not have registered, you know, Fayetteville-Manlius athletics as a phrase. So they might make a different shirt and say, oh, you know, we're not infringing. But like I said, there are protections, even if it's not registered, but something to think about. But I do think there are a lot of advantages to the registration process.
Lindsay, I'm just curious why you're focusing just on New York State and not USPTO.
I'm not as familiar with the USPTO process, but I think that it's unlikely that there are going to be people outside of the state who are selling products using FM's logo. I mean, I understand there's probably alumni across the country, but I think the likelihood of the infringement is going to be someone in the community or someone local who's trying to sell this product to community members. So again, I don't have a ton of familiarity with the actual process, but I imagine it may be a bit more arduous than New York State's process. And so, you know, time, money, that may be another consideration as to whether or not you really need protection on a national level versus just the state.
But even without that, with a USPTO registration, you've got protection in New York State, whether it's separately registered in New York or not. You have that broader protection that's in place. It's equally as enforceable, whether locally or beyond local.
Sure.
Okay.
Lindsay, thank you. It's Daryl. I'm just wondering if this board should decide to go forward, do we first write a policy or do we first apply for the trademark protection?
Sure. So I think policy is the first step. And then you could always amend the policy in the future if you do receive the registration, and you could actually put that specifically in the policy saying these are our registered trademarks. But yeah, I think policy first.
With that in mind, I think perhaps the next step is to have the policy committee take a look at this and see if there is, and look at the, you had some sample policies, Lindsay, you said?
Yeah, I could send you some sample policies over. Take a look
Okay.
at.
Well, if the board's in agreement, why don't we have Lindsay send those over and have the policy committee take a look and see about potential of having a policy related to this matter. And then the second step would be decide if we wanted to do any trademarks. Is everyone okay with that? Anyone have a different process?
Sounds good.
Okay, so we will add that to the policy committee agenda. And thank you very much, Lindsay. Very informative. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we may not be able to add that to tomorrow's meeting.
Oh, no, not tomorrow.
Okay. So just as long as everyone's clear, because we already have an agenda set and, you know, my time is already committed prior to and after that meeting.
Okay, nope. We'll just put it in the tickler. Thank you. All right, thank you again, Lindsay. Unless there's any final questions for Lindsay before she goes. Okay, thank you. Sarah, do we have, we're prepared for 3.02, I think it is now, the resolution?
Yes, we are. I'll admit Catherine now. One moment, please.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going back to the real property law section 487 resolution rescind. So I'm going to get a motion and a second on the resolution, and then we will have discussion. So is there a motion that it be resolved that the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School Districts opt out of the tax exemption made available by the real property tax law section 487 for solar, wind, and farm waste energy systems is hereby rescinded, and such exemption shall be applicable within the boundaries of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mark. Second from Daryl. Discussion.
Well, I think just ahead of waiting for Catherine on this, the third whereas clause in there has an erroneous date. So the last time that we adopted this resolution was November 16.
Oh, thank you. Because we had initially submitted this to the district with the expectation we were going to do both at the same time. So we just need to amend that.
Yeah, November 16, we did a rescission and readoption. So that's the last adoption date.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any additional hands for any discussion. So is there a motion to approve this resolution with the amendment of changing it to whereas on November 16th, 2020, the Board of Education adopted a resolution outing out of the tax exemption under real property tax law, section 487. I'm sorry, I'm flipping screens. I missed that. Okay, Sherry, and second from Kelly. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Next is the resolution for the commercial pilot agreement. Is there a motion that the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute the pilot agreements and other documents pursuant to the terms set forth below and in the form approved by legal counsel? Is there a motion? Thank you, Sherry, and a second from Mark. Discussion?
Marissa, can someone please expand on the second bullet here? Educational contribution agreement providing a donation towards the promotion of education in the field of science techniques for each project. What, in plain English, can someone please explain what that means?
Yes. So what that means is that the company has agreed that at the close of construction, which would be year one of the pilot, what would be the pilot, they're going to provide a substantial donation to the school district that the school district can basically use for anything within that area, which is pretty broad, to help promote education. So there is really, the benefit is that you're going to have about $163,000 per project come to the school district if the board accepts the donation, that the board can then use to further the education of your students.
Okay, then why wouldn't we just write the resolution to say you're going to give us $163,000 as opposed to the wording that's in there?
So what we're finalizing the educational contribution agreement right now. And then we were going to, once we get that document finalized, we were going to present that to the board with the resolution to accept the donation. It won't be until next year anyway, so we still have a little bit of time. Also, we want to keep it separate from the pilot because it's not part of the pilot. It is a separate transaction. So we didn't want it to appear as if it was part of the pilot.
Okay, so I'm going to defer to our lawyers that are on our staff. So Dan, help me understand. I guess I understand what she's saying, but can they turn around in a year from now and not give us the donation if we don't put it in this resolution?
Well, just by the term of this resolution by itself, they can give us $1 and satisfy it.
So we're not going to sign the pilot until we have this together too. So we're going to have authorization to sign the pilot, but we'll have them, they'll come together. It's not going to be one and not the other.
So we'll potentially have a check in hand before signing.
We won't have a check in hand, but we will have the educational contribution agreement in hand.
So, Catherine, can you expand a little bit on, so you threw out a dollar number there. How did we get there?
So this was after a lot of negotiation between the school district and the company to come up with a number in which we did do some reduction in the pilot. This district has an option. They had an option of either taking a standard pilot where they would get $5,500 a year for 15 years, but that would come in underneath the district's levy, so it would be no realized revenue to the district, or the district can negotiate to get an upfront payment that would be reduced somewhat, but in turn, it would be actual revenue, additional revenue that would be separate from the levy calculation. So it would be money that the district could use right now or next year for the district's needs. And it was based on, what we ultimately did is we took the payments. We did carve out some for a pilot because we felt that it was necessary to have at least some for the pilot agreement. And then we applied we took the entire payment, applied a discount rate And that's where we ended up with 163,000 approximately per project.
Catherine, if I understand from discussions with Bill previously, they wanted to give us much less, and we've actually negotiated much more.
Yes, that is correct. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I've also, note that I've run through the PV calculations, and they do bear out based upon, what's noted on the sheet that was presented to us. So, what we would call the hybrid model in our discussions during the Finance Committee meeting seemed to make sense for the district because we also would not be taking a hit on our property tax levy by backing out a traditional pilot agreement every year.
Yes.
Am I still correct that this is on the improvements on that property only? I don't know what the taxes are on that property currently, but those taxes remain. This is only with respect to the improvements. Is that correct still?
Exactly. So the taxes on the property right now will not change. This only relates to the improvements. You're still going to get $1,000 a year per property under the pilot. And then in addition to that, the district would receive a sizable educational contribution that a donation that it could use. So there wouldn't be any less revenue coming into the district.
And you're saying that's 163,000 per project. There's 2 projects, so we're doubling that amount.
Yes.
And payable at what time frame?
So it's meant to be payable at the close of construction. We're waiting to get exact dates on when that will be. COVID has, delayed things somewhat, which I think we've seen across the board. Originally, the company had hoped to start construction before the winter time. Now they're looking to start it in the spring. But the agreement would be that upon close of construction, that they would make the payment. So it'd be year 1 of the pilot.
I'm sorry, and when you're saying close of construction, you're talking about commencement of construction?
When the construction is completed. So once they close out and they start generating electricity from the project is when they would agree to when they've agreed to make the payment.
Bill, I'm curious on any input that you have on this.
Yeah, I fully support this. As Catherine mentioned, and Mark also mentioned it, this has been an ongoing negotiation between the district and this company to get the best benefit for the district and its taxpayers. So, we felt that coming in with a hybrid model where there would be a partial pilot agreement and also this educational contribution model would be best for our situation. We felt that, the additional $326,000 generated would be something that we will probably need this next year as well.
And Bill, just to follow up on that, I support it. I'm just confused by the wording. I know we went over these documents in Finance Committee and I'm fine with all that. It was just, I expected to see those numbers in the resolution and I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing different language. And so that's why I'm pausing and raising the issue. But as long as the rest of the board is comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with the dollars that we're talking about. That's fine.
I'm just not sure why we wouldn't put them in there or a not to be less than number in there.
We were trying to keep the educational contribution agreement separate from the pilot. And that's one of the main reasons why we are having them under 2 different board resolutions. That, and like I said, we're still trying to finalize the language in the educational contribution agreement. But we didn't want it to look like they were part and parcel. So in having them in 2 separate resolutions, it helps to support that position.
But we only have them in 1 resolution here.
We're going to have, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
But there's only one resolution before us tonight, and they're both in that 1 resolution.
So the Board of Education has to accept the donation. So when we get to have the finalized educational contribution in place, then we plan to present a resolution to the board with the educational contribution in which they would agree to accept the donation.
So are we authorizing Dr. Tice to execute, or the district to execute the pilot agreement as well as the educational contribution agreement tonight?
Even if you're not, but even, we just said, you know, for such other documents as may be necessary. But even if he did, you would still, as a board, have to accept it. So there's still going to have to be a separate action by the board. But we wanted to present it to you when we had the entire agreement in place, so that way we could present the whole agreement to you. And part of this is a relatively new concept. I had talked to Bill about this. This is something that we just started exploring with school districts about 4 months ago as a way to get an additional benefit to districts. I know that I presented with you and Mike Schuster, before you and Mike Schuster, maybe a year or two ago, about some of the harmful effects of pilots. And this was a way, in seeing all of this money that's coming in through solar projects lately, I know that a lot of districts have had a push with solar projects. And seeing this come in, this is a way for the school districts to try to realize a benefit of all of the solar money that's coming in, instead of just running it through your levy and having those impacts that we see with the pilots.
Thanks so much, Catherine. And thank you, Bill. Good negotiating.
Do we have any, just so we can understand the broader picture, understanding of what the forecasted taxes would have been off of this project over those 15 years without a pilot? With the improvement, without a pilot?
Bill, do you want me to go ahead with that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, I saw you take off your mute, so I want to make sure. So no, because where we are right now, it's very difficult to determine what the assessed value of the solar projects are. I know that your assessor for the town of Manlius has put some nominal assessments on residential homes, but right now there's a big question across New York State about how to assess solar projects, especially commercial solar projects, and because they are so new. We do have litigation in the town of Bloomfield, East Bloomfield, regarding solar projects, but that's about the only one that I've seen out there. So we don't really know how much it would be worth, and it's likely that if it was to go on the real property tax rolls, that you would have litigation. But the other piece, the more important piece to this, what we're finding is that if these properties have to go on to the real property tax rolls, financially they can't move forward, because the margins are so thin with solar projects, and they're so heavily reliant on the subsidies that they get from the state and the incentives that they get from the state, that they can't move forward if they have to pay full real property tax.
That was probably the only thing I would add, is that, you know, if it was a situation where we couldn't come to an agreement, they would probably look for a different location.
Yeah. And we've seen that happen with other school districts where they've pulled out if we can't do a pilot.
All right, well, just assuming it's going to go forward, there's just one typo where it says follow agreements, not following agreements.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. We'll make that minor correction, grammatical correction. I don't think I need another first and second. We've had some thorough discussion. Thank you very much, Catherine, for all of your help with that. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is real property law section 487 opt out. Is there a motion that it be resolved that no tax exemption made available by section 487 of the real property tax law shall be applicable within the jurisdiction of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District with respect to any solar or wind energy system or farm waste energy system constructed subsequent to the effective date of this resolution? No tax exemption made available by section 487 of the real property tax law shall be applicable within the jurisdiction of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District with respect to any micro hydroelectric energy system, fuel cell electric generating system, micro combined heat and power generating equipment system, or electric energy storage equipment or electric energy storage system constructed subsequent to the effective date of the resolution. The superintendent of schools is authorized to take any other necessary and proper action to implement this resolution. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mark, and a second from Sherry. Discussion?
Catherine, just a real quick question. So we just approved entering into a pilot agreement, but the pilot agreement's not been entered into, so it's not, because it's not before us yet. So how does that interplay with if we now do this opt-out, but the pilot agreement's not in place? So you're going to seek to sign a pilot agreement at a time when there's an opt-out in place.
The pilot agreement is effective for today's date, and we've actually forwarded it to the company for final agreement on the language, with today's date being the effective date, December 14th, with the expectation that the district would approve it for today. So once we receive it from the company, based on this opt-out, or based on the action of the board tonight, the superintendent will be able to sign it with today's effective date.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any additional questions or comments from the board? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Thank you. And thank you very much again, Catherine.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so now we are on item 3.05, approval, well, not 3.05 anyway, but you get the approval of minutes from November 16th, 2020, regular meeting of the board. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Daryl. Second from Kelly. Any discussion of the minutes? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of a special board meeting held on December 3rd, 2020. Is there a motion to approve the December 3rd minutes? Thank you, Daryl. And a second, please. Thank you, Dan. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Abstention from Sherry. Thank you. All right. Oops. Next, the King & King Architects contract. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approve the contract with King & King Architects for the Fayetteville-Manlius, for the Fayetteville Elementary Wall Project in the amount of $12,000? Dan, first from Dan and a second from Sherry. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right. Next on the agenda, the NYLAF administrator change. Is there a motion of the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District that by executed counterpart approve as of the 14th day of December 2020, the following actions and resolutions regarding the amended definition of the NYLAF investment consultant and marketing agreement to be PMA Asset Management LLC and PMA Securities LLC respectively? Is there a motion? Thank you, Kelly. A second from Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right. Next on the agenda under board development, the CNY school board liaison talking points from November 17th are listed. We did want to note in regards to our board goals that the board has set a meeting date for our diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee. That meeting will take place on January 4th at 3 p.m. And our board retreat is scheduled for February 22nd, 2021. Hopefully everyone has finished How to Be Anti-Racist. And I also sent an article along to everyone, moving beyond the statement, implementing anti-racist DEI systematic change. If anyone needs that link again, please let me know. I'll be happy to send that out to everyone or anyone who needs it. Any further thoughts or questions or anything about our board goals? All right, so we have a group of us on January 4th, and then we'll have a report out at that following board meeting.
I just want to jump in that although I wasn't at the last meeting, it is
That's right.
that I am interested in. So I will plan to attend on that January 3rd meeting.
4th.
January 4th.
Thank you, Sherry. All right. Working agenda items. I see nothing. Anyone have anything under working agenda items? Nope. All right. Potential considerations for future meetings. Nope. All right. Future meeting agendas. So there you see our meeting date for the subcommittee, Hall distinction induction ceremony, and our budget workshop in January, and the dates afterwards. All right.
Marissa, just a point of clarification. So on January 4th, that's not a full board meeting. That's a subcommittee meeting, correct?
Yes, that is the subcommittee. And I believe I remember everyone who's on the subcommittee, myself, Kelly, Elena, Rebecca, Sherry, and Daryl, correct?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to confirm that wasn't a full board meeting because all the other dates that you have listed here, I believe, are intended to be full board meetings. So that was a clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Future meeting agenda dates to remember. Next, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Rebecca, and a second from Daryl. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Oops. All right. So we do have executive session this evening for the purpose of discussion of a student matter and employment history of a particular individual. And just for the public, we will be in executive session. We're going to come out into public session briefly to approve personnel or to vote, to vote on the personnel actions on the agenda. That will be very quick. I don't believe that will be live streamed, but it will be recorded for the public. So if you are watching the meeting and wondering if you should leave at this point, we are going to be in executive session. Not sure how long, perhaps an hour or longer. Then we'll come out for a minute or so to approve personnel, and then we will adjourn right afterwards. So just making sure that the public is aware of that. So is there a motion for the board to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing a student matter and the employment history of a particular individual? Thank you, Sherry. A second from Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, so we'll take a minute here to collect ourselves, get the live stream shut off. And which attorney are we waiting for? Which attorney is it? I know one of them will be joining us.
Lindsay,